Ravi Bhatia, a respected Indian businessman in Los Angeles, and Kara Thompson, a young aspiring model chasing dreams of glamour, seemed worlds apart, until a secret affair bound them together in a dangerous web of lies, obsession, and betrayal that would end with one of them dead and the other. Facing life behind bars, Ravi Bhatia had always been the man people looked up to. Born in Mumbai and having moved to the United States in his late 20s, he had worked tirelessly to build his life from the ground up. By the time he turned 44, he had established a thriving IT consulting firm in Los Angeles, employing dozens of people and handling high-profile contracts. His reputation in the community was impeccable. He was the generous sponsor at local charity galas, the friendly face at cultural festivals, and the devoted husband who was often seen with his elegant wife, Anjali, at social gatherings. Their large house in a gated suburban neighborhood reflected their success: neatly trimmed hedges, a sparkling pool in the backyard, and a garage with 2 luxury cars. To anyone observing from the outside, Ravi's life seemed like the picture of stability and fulfillment. Inside the walls of that beautiful home, things were quieter but still warm. Anjali had been with him since before his business took off. She had supported him through years of uncertainty, moving with him across continents, sacrificing her own career ambitions to focus on raising their 2 children. The children were thriving, bright, polite, and well-mannered. Every Sunday morning, the family shared breakfast together. Ravi never missed a school performance or a family holiday. He appeared to be a man who valued his personal life as much as his professional one. Yet beneath the polished exterior, Ravi was growing restless. He could not pinpoint when the feeling began. Perhaps it was the monotony of his routine, the predictability of conversations at home, or the long hours in the office that left him searching for something to break the cycle. He was not unhappy exactly, but there was an emptiness he did not admit to anyone. At first, he brushed it aside, convincing himself it was nothing more than midlife fatigue. But over time, the quiet dissatisfaction began to fester. He started to notice younger women more often, lingering over their smiles, their energy, and the way they seemed unburdened by responsibility. It began harmlessly, scrolling through social media late at night after his family was asleep, liking photos, occasionally messaging strangers under the guise of professional networking. The thrill of being noticed, even by someone who knew nothing about his life, gave him a rush he hadn't felt in years. He told himself it was just harmless fun, a private indulgence that hurt no one. Still, he became more careful, deleting conversations, using a second phone, and adopting a different name when chatting online. In business meetings, Ravi remained the picture of professionalism, but his mind often wandered. On flights for work, he would browse dating apps under fake profiles, chatting with women who had no idea they were speaking to a married man with children. It wasn't about love, not yet. It was about the novelty, the distraction from the sameness of his days. What he didn't realize was that each small step was leading him toward a dangerous path, one where the lines between fantasy and reality would blur, and the life he had built so carefully could unravel in an instant. Kara Thompson was the kind of girl who caught attention without even trying. At 21, she had the easy charm of youth, paired with a restless energy that made her stand out in a city full of dreamers. Born and raised in a modest home in Riverside, she had moved to Los Angeles at 19 with hopes of becoming a model. The city, however, was less welcoming than she imagined. Rent was high, jobs were unstable, and rejection was constant. She found herself juggling part-time gigs, bartending at a trendy downtown lounge one week, handing out flyers for events the next, while scrolling through her phone late at night, searching for opportunities that could change her life. Her friends often teased her for gravitating toward older, successful men. Kara never denied it. She knew what she wanted, a life of comfort, security, and the kind of luxury she had only seen in magazines. For her, it wasn't about romance as much as it was about escape. She was tired of scraping by, of counting every dollar before paying rent, of living in apartments where the walls were thin enough to hear every argument next door. She believed she was destined for more, and all it would take was meeting the right person. When Ravi's message first appeared in her inbox, it seemed no different from the dozens of others she ignored. But his profile was polished, his words confident, and he didn't waste time with clumsy compliments. He introduced himself as Rohit, a divorced tech consultant who had recently moved to Los Angeles. His life, he said, was focused on work, but he missed having someone to share it with. Kara was intrigued, not just by his appearance, but by the way he carried himself in their conversations. He wasn't begging for attention, he was offering it like a gift. Their first meeting was in an upscale coffee shop in Beverly Hills. Kara arrived in a simple dress, nervous but excited. Ravi looked exactly as he had in his photos, well groomed, with an expensive watch peeking from under the cuff of his shirt. He spoke with a calm authority, asking questions about her life without making her feel interrogated. By the time they parted ways, she was already imagining the possibilities. From then on, their meetings became more frequent. Ravi spoiled her with gifts, a designer handbag one week, diamond earrings the next. He paid her rent without her asking, telling her it was his way of helping her focus on her dreams. They dined at exclusive restaurants, stayed in hotels with floor-to-ceiling views of the city, and spent afternoons driving along the coast. Kara felt like she had stepped into a different world, one far removed from the small apartment she had once shared with two roommates. But the more time they spent together, the more Ravi's fascination deepened into something consuming. He was careful with his lies, weaving a story of independence and freedom, while never revealing the wife and children who waited for him at home. Kara, caught up in the whirlwind, saw no reason to doubt him. She thought she had found the man who could give her the life she had always dreamed of, unaware that beneath the generosity and charm was a darkness that would eventually change everything. Ravi's double life began to strain under the weight of its own secrecy. At home, his absences became harder to explain. Late night meetings, unexpected business trips, and sudden phone calls outside the house were becoming routine. Anjali, once trusting, started to notice the changes. She saw how he avoided eye contact when she asked about his day, how he guarded his phone as though it contained state secrets, and how his smiles seemed less genuine. She kept her suspicions to herself at first, telling herself it might be work stress. But deep down, she knew something was wrong. The turning point came when she noticed a charge on their joint credit card for a luxury hotel in West Hollywood. Ravi claimed it was for a client meeting, but the excuse was flimsy. Anjali's instincts told her that confronting him directly would lead to denial and excuses, so she decided on another approach. Quietly, she reached out to a private investigator, a discreet man recommended by a friend, someone skilled at uncovering hidden truths without drawing attention. She gave him Ravi's schedule, his car details, and even a recent photo. Then she waited. Meanwhile, Kara was starting to see cracks in the image Ravi had built for her. She had always believed he was single, but small inconsistencies began to catch her attention. He never stayed overnight, always leaving with vague explanations about early meetings. He avoided certain public places and refused to introduce her to any of his friends. The final blow came when a friend of hers, working at a cultural festival, recognized Ravi from an event where he had been with his wife and children. The friend sent her a picture. Kara stared at it for hours, Ravi smiling in traditional attire, his arm around a woman who was clearly his wife. The betrayal hit her harder than she expected. She wasn't just angry, she felt humiliated. Every gift, every word, every promise now felt like part of an elaborate lie. She confronted him the next time they met, demanding the truth. Ravi tried to downplay it, claiming his marriage was over in everything but name, that he was staying for the children, that she was the one he truly cared about. But his words only made her more furious. Kara's anger quickly turned into a threat. She told him she had nothing to lose, that she could send the photo to his wife, his clients, and even post it online. She said she could destroy the image he had worked so hard to protect. Ravi was rattled. He knew how much he stood to lose: his marriage, his business, his reputation in the community. He tried to reason with her, but every conversation only seemed to push her further toward exposure. At the same time, The private investigator was piecing together a trail of evidence: photos of Ravi and Kara together, records of hotel stays, receipts for expensive gifts. Anjali didn't yet know the full extent, but she sensed the moment of truth was approaching. Ravi, caught between a wife closing in on the truth and a mistress threatening to reveal it, was trapped in a tightening circle. The careful balance of lies he had maintained was starting to collapse, and deep inside, he feared that the fallout would be more than just the loss of his comfortable life. The night Kara died began like any other, at least on the surface. Rain had been falling steadily over Los Angeles, washing the neon-lit streets in a dull silver sheen. Ravi had spent the day in a state of simmering anxiety. Kara had been bombarding him with calls and messages all week, each one sharper than the last. She wanted answers, money, and a promise that he would leave his wife immediately. When he ignored her, the threats escalated. She would send everything to his wife, to his business partners, to the media. Her tone left no doubt she meant it. By the evening, Ravi decided he needed to see her face to face. He told Anjali he had to meet a client urgently and drove through the rain toward Kara's West Hollywood apartment. His mind was a storm of panic, anger, and fear. He couldn't let her destroy everything he had built. The thought of his children finding out, of his employees losing faith in him, of the shame in his community. It all felt unbearable. Somewhere between the freeway and her street, his fear hardened into something darker. When Kara opened the door, she looked exhausted but defiant. There was an empty wine glass on the table and her phone in her hand, as though she'd been waiting for him to walk in so she could deliver her final blow. The argument began instantly. She accused him of lying, of using her, of wasting her time. He accused her of blackmail, of threatening his family, of being ungrateful for everything he had done. Voices rose. She moved toward her phone, telling him she could send the proof in seconds. Something in him snapped. The struggle was sudden and violent. He grabbed for the phone, she pulled back, and in the chaos she fell against the table. The glass shattered on the floor. He struck her, once, then again, until the fight was gone from her eyes. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the sound of rain tapping against the window. Ravi stood over her, his chest heaving, the reality of what he'd done sinking in like cold water. Panic took over. He looked around the apartment, searching for anything that could tie him to the scene, but it was too late. His fingerprints were on the wine glass, his watch had fallen under the bed during the struggle, and the neighbors had likely heard the shouting. His mind raced, but his body felt heavy, sluggish, as though moving through water. Ravi left the apartment and drove aimlessly through the rain for hours, replaying the moment over and over. He considered fleeing the city entirely, but exhaustion and fear pushed him toward a motel near San Diego, where he checked in under a false name. He didn't know that by then, police were already piecing together the scene, gathering evidence, and tracing his car from traffic cameras. The rain had washed the streets clean, but it could not erase the trail he had left behind. The night had ended in blood, and the life he once controlled so carefully was now unraveling beyond repair. The trial drew national attention, not only because of the brutality of the crime, but because of the man accused. The image of Ravi Bhatia, the respectable businessman, the family man, the community leader, stood in stark contrast to the details the prosecution revealed in court. Every sordid piece of his double life was laid bare: the secret relationship, the lies to both women, the expensive gifts, the threats exchanged before the night of the killing. It was a slow dismantling of the identity he had so carefully crafted for more than 2 decades. Anjali sat through the hearings with a blank expression, her presence quiet but heavy. The woman who had once stood beside him at charity events now listened as lawyers described how her husband had deceived her for months, maybe years. She heard about the private investigator's findings, the hotel stays, the messages, the promises made to another woman while their children slept under the same roof. The betrayal cut deep, but even deeper was the horror of knowing that the man she had built a life with was capable of such violence. The prosecution painted a picture of premeditation. They showed the jury text messages where Ravi had hinted at needing to end the problem and had asked Kara to meet him in private despite her growing hostility. They argued that he went to her apartment that night with the intention of silencing her forever. The defense tried to counter, claiming the incident was a tragic accident, a moment of panic after a heated argument spiraled out of control. But the physical evidence told another story. The bruising, the repeated blows, the fact that he fled instead of calling for help, all of it weighed heavily against him. The verdict came after only a few hours of deliberation: guilty of first-degree murder. The words echoed in the courtroom, final and unshakable. Ravi showed no visible reaction, but those who watched closely said they saw his shoulders sink as if the weight of the sentence had finally settled on him. Life in prison without the possibility of parole. For a man who had once measured success in luxury cars and corporate contracts, the thought of spending the rest of his life in a cell was a punishment beyond imagination. Anjali filed for divorce immediately after the trial, moving away with the children and changing their last names. She avoided interviews, determined to shield her family from further public scrutiny. Kara's family, on the other hand, spoke openly about the pain of losing her. They described her dreams, her struggles, and how they felt the system had failed her long before the night she died. They called for stronger protections for young women targeted by men who use power and money as weapons. The case lingered in headlines for weeks, dissected by crime podcasts and debated on social media. For some, it was a cautionary tale about deception and greed. For others, it was a grim reminder of how quickly love, lies, and desperation can ignite into tragedy. In the end, 2 families were left shattered. A young life was stolen, and the man who once seemed untouchable was reduced to nothing more than an inmate number in a state prison. The polished image was gone forever, replaced by a legacy of betrayal and blood.